It began before dawn. A silence so deep, it sounded like the earth had forgotten to breathe. Evelyn stood by her window, eyes tracing the faint outline of the sea beyond the glass, the horizon trembling under pale threads of light. Inside her chest, something restless stirred, the same ache that had chased her through every night of sleepless thought. She had spent years fighting herself, arguing with a voice that only ever wanted to be heard. But this morning felt different. The air was thicker, heavier, as if holding its breath with her. A strange calm began to rise from somewhere unseen, something vast and wordless, and as she pressed her palm against the cold pane, she whispered, "What if peace was never meant to be quiet?" The sea air met her like a confession. Evelyn stepped barefoot onto the cold boards of the porch, the first true breath of morning cutting through her half-awake thoughts. The horizon shimmered with mist and light, the kind that never stays long enough to name. Her heart felt split between staying and fleeing, but the quiet pulled her closer. The world looked the same. Houses still, gulls circling, the ocean whispering beneath it all. Yet something had shifted inside her. She realized she wasn't hearing the waves. She was hearing herself in them, the voice she had silenced for years, speaking again in the rhythm of tide and wind. She walked along the shoreline, her footprints vanishing almost as soon as they were made. The tide crept forward, dissolving each trace of her, reminding her how easily the world forgets what resists it. But for the first time, she didn't fight that thought. She let the waves erase her steps and felt a strange comfort in the loss. The sky above her glowed faintly pink, reflecting the quiet ache of beginning again. In that still moment, she realized peace wasn't found by holding on. It was found by allowing everything, even the parts of her that never fit, to be carried away. From the cliff above, Jonas watched the lone figure by the sea, her presence a fragile line between earth and water. He didn't know her name yet, but something about her stillness spoke louder than any introduction could. He closed his notebook, feeling words stir but choosing silence instead. The wind carried a scent of salt and distance, and with it, an intuition he hadn't felt in years. The knowing that some lives meet not by chance, but by resonance. Down below, Evelyn lifted her head, sensing the gaze of someone unseen. Not threatening but familiar, like a memory approaching from far away. The day lifted slowly, and with it, the weight on her chest began to shift. Back in her studio, Evelyn opened the window wide and let the wind wander through the room. Canvases leaned like silent witnesses around her, the colors half-born, unfinished, waiting. She stood before one, a blank surface, and saw her reflection caught faintly in it, shimmering under thin light. For the first time, she didn't flinch from the woman she saw there. The fight inside her stilled, not because she won, but because she stopped trying. In that stillness, she felt it, the unseen presence, warm and whole, waiting quietly within her surrender. By late afternoon, the sky had softened into silver. Evelyn walked the cliff path, the wind brushing her hair across her face like a living hand. Each step carried her closer to something she didn't understand, but could no longer resist. The ocean murmured below, steady and patient, the sound of something ancient remembering her. At the edge of the path, she noticed a figure seated on a stone bench writing, a man whose stillness seemed to belong to the sea itself. He looked up once, not startled, simply aware. Their eyes met for a moment that lasted far too long to be accidental, and in it, something wordless passed between them, the quiet recognition of two souls who had once forgotten they were whole. Jonas broke the silence first. His voice was low, roughened by years of speaking rarely but meaning every word. "It's different up here," he said, gesturing toward the sea. Evelyn nodded, though she didn't know what he meant. "The waves sound quieter," he added, "when you stop trying to name them." The sentence lingered between them, heavier than it seemed. She felt something inside her shift, a small loosening, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For once, she didn't try to fill the silence. She simply stood there, letting the moment breathe through her. Later that day, Evelyn found herself in the small seaside cafe at the edge of the pier. The rain had come suddenly, soft and insistent, blurring the glass with trembling patterns. She sat alone, sketching the outline of a wave on a napkin when the door opened. Jonas again, shaking the rain from his coat. Their eyes met with quiet surprise that felt too natural to question. He ordered black coffee, took the seat across from her without asking, and they sat there in the hush of rain and steam, not as strangers but as echoes finding their way back into sound. As evening fell, they walked together along the pier, the scent of rain mingling with salt. Jonas spoke little, but each silence between his words seemed deliberate, as if meaning itself hid within what wasn't said. Evelyn listened, not to his voice but to the quiet it carried, that gentle assurance that peace did not need to be earned. "You don't need to fix what's already whole," he said softly, watching the sea darken beneath them. The sentence lingered like a prayer. Evelyn looked out toward the horizon, and for the first time in years felt something inside her stop reaching. That night, back in her studio, Evelyn could still hear his words echoing beneath the sound of waves. The storm outside had quieted, leaving only the steady rhythm of raindrops on the roof. She sat before her easel, the canvas blank, untouched. But for the first time, the emptiness didn't frighten her. It invited her. She dipped her brush into the faintest trace of blue, her hand trembling not from fear but recognition. Somewhere deep inside, she sensed that the presence she had felt for days, that stillness that held her at dawn, had a voice now. And it spoke through the simplest thing, her own breathing. The wind shifted that night. It came not from the sea, but from somewhere deeper, a quiet urging that felt both gentle and relentless. Evelyn sat by the open window, the world outside dissolving into fog. Every sound seemed to come from within her, the creak of the house, the faint hum of her breath, the memory of a child's laughter, lost in time. She closed her eyes, and the walls around her began to fade. The ocean was still there, but now it sounded like her own pulse. Steady, fragile, alive. For the first time, she didn't try to silence it. She whispered into the dark, "I'm still here." The next morning brought rain that wouldn't stop. Jonas arrived unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an air of calm that unsettled her more than the storm. They sat in silence, listening to the rain drum against the roof. "You can't climb out of it," he said finally, voice low. "You have to walk through." Evelyn met his gaze, and for a moment everything she'd hidden broke open. The years of trying, the guilt, the weight of pretending to be fine. She nodded, unable to speak. Sometimes truth doesn't need words. It only needs someone who doesn't turn away. That evening, Evelyn dreamed of her childhood home, the small white house near the field where her laughter once lived. She saw herself at 7, standing barefoot in the doorway, clutching a paintbrush too big for her hand. The walls were brighter then, the air full of warmth she'd long forgotten. But as she reached out to touch the memory, the light flickered and the child turned toward her, eyes full of silent accusation. Evelyn woke gasping, her face wet with tears. She realized then that the child she'd abandoned still waited, somewhere inside the house of her heart. Jonas found her near the cliffs the next day, standing motionless as the sea churned below. The storm clouds hung heavy, the air electric with coming rain. "She's still there," Evelyn said quietly, not turning to face him. The child in the dream. Jonas stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Then listen to her," he said. The wind howled between them, carrying the scent of salt and rain. Evelyn closed her eyes. The roar of the sea became a voice, her own, small and trembling, asking not for rescue but for forgiveness. That night, Evelyn lit a single candle in her studio and painted for hours without seeing what her hands were doing. When she stopped, she stepped back and froze. On the canvas was not the sea nor the sky, but the face of a child, eyes wide, forgiving, waiting. The brush slipped from her hand, landing softly on the floor. A sob rose in her throat, but it wasn't from pain. It was from recognition. She realized the child had never left. She had only been waiting for Evelyn to stop running long enough to turn around. The storm broke before dawn. Rain lashed the windows as if the world itself were trying to wash away her name. Evelyn sat on the floor, her back against the wall. The candle she'd lit long melted to nothing. Her painting, the child's face, leaned against the easel, untouched by shadow or flame. She watched the wind bend the trees outside, felt the house tremble, and for a moment she thought she might dissolve with it. But as thunder rolled through the sky, she heard something softer beneath it, the echo of her own voice, steady and clear. Let go. She closed her eyes. The storm raged on, but inside her something finally broke open, and instead of falling apart, she fell inward. The next morning came without color. Fog hung low over the sea, muffling sound and sight alike. Evelyn walked barefoot to the cliffs, the world still soaked from the night before. The ocean below heaved with soft exhaustion, as though even the storm had wept itself dry. She stood at the edge, the wind wrapping her in cold air and salt. There was no fear this time, only a strange clarity. Every thought she'd clung to had dissolved. There was nothing left to defend. In that emptiness, she felt something vast move through her. Not wind, not spirit, but a stillness that held her from within. Jonas found her there, still standing in the mist. He didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, silent as the sea. They watched the horizon disappear and reappear through shifting veils of fog. "You're not afraid anymore," he said finally, his voice little more than breath. "No," she answered, eyes still closed. "I think I was never really falling. I was being caught." Jonas smiled, a quiet curve of understanding, and for the first time, Evelyn turned to face him fully. No words followed. None were needed. The air between them held everything they'd both spent years trying to say. That evening, Evelyn returned to her studio. The air smelled of rain and turpentine. She stood before the canvas once more, but this time, she didn't reach for a brush. She just watched. The face of the child she had painted seemed to breathe in the flickering candlelight. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, softly, she whispered, "Thank you for waiting." The child's painted eyes seemed to glisten, and Evelyn realized she no longer needed to fix or finish anything. The art wasn't the painting. It was the surrender that made space for grace to move. That night, she dreamt again. But this time, there was no house, no storm, no child waiting in the doorway. There was only light. She floated within it, weightless, unafraid. Every memory, every wound, every breath she'd fought to control, dissolved into something infinite and kind. A voice rose from the quiet, neither male nor female, not even words. Only knowing. It said nothing new, yet it felt like everything she had ever longed to hear. You were never alone. Evelyn smiled in her sleep. For the first time in her life, she felt held not by hands, but by presence itself. When she woke, the world had changed, not in shape, but in sound. The sea no longer roared or whispered. It breathed with her. Every color seemed touched by something divine, every shadow gentle instead of heavy. Evelyn moved slowly through the morning, as though afraid to disturb the quiet grace surrounding her. She didn't reach for her phone, her brush, or her thoughts. She simply stood by the window, watching sunlight spill over the waves. The stillness within her felt alive, humming softly through her veins. For the first time, she realized peace wasn't waiting outside her. It had always been the space she carried home. Later that day, she returned to the cliffs. The wind was softer now, the horizon clear. Jonas was already there, seated on the stone bench where they first met. He turned as she approached, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. No questions, no expectations. "You found it," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "I stopped looking." The wind brushed between them like a shared breath. Neither spoke again. The silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was communion, the language of souls that have finally remembered how to listen. Back in her studio, she painted again, but not from memory or vision. Her hands moved without thought, guided by something unseen. Each brushstroke felt like prayer, each color a quiet hymn. The canvas filled with light. No figures, no forms, just the essence of stillness itself. When she stepped back, she didn't see a painting. She saw the presence, radiant, formless, alive. It wasn't something she had created. It had painted itself through her. Tears rose, not of sorrow, but of awe. She whispered, "Thank you," to the silence that now had a heartbeat. That evening, Jonas visited her studio. He stood before the luminous painting in silence, eyes reflecting the same glow that filled the room. "It's not yours anymore," he said softly. Evelyn nodded. "It never was." They both smiled, not with joy or sadness, but with understanding. He turned to leave, and as he reached the door, Evelyn spoke again. "Shh, Jonas." He paused. "Wait, thank you for helping me see." His answer came as he stepped into the fading light. "You were always seeing. You just needed to stop looking away." That night, Evelyn walked along the beach under a sky filled with stars. The tide whispered at her feet, cool and rhythmic. She tilted her head back, eyes open to the infinite expanse above. For the first time, she didn't feel small beneath it. She felt vast, woven into everything she saw. The presence no longer hovered around her. It pulsed within her heartbeat, her breath, her being. She smiled, whispering into the salt-washed air. "You were never outside me, were you?" The wind answered with silence, but this time, the silence was alive. Morning light slipped into her studio like a whisper. The smell of salt and turpentine mingled in the air as Evelyn arranged her brushes, not out of habit, but devotion. Her movements were slower now, deliberate, each gesture carrying reverence for the silence surrounding her. The canvas stood before her, blank yet breathing, as if waiting to be met, not conquered. She no longer painted to find peace. She painted because peace wished to express itself through her hands. Every brushstroke felt like a conversation with something infinite. In that rhythm of creation, she found reunion, not between artist and art, but between soul and silence. As the days unfolded, her art began to change. The strokes grew lighter, freer, almost weightless. She painted not scenes or faces, but feelings. The hush before dawn, the tremor of wind against the sea, the unseen warmth between two souls that no longer need words. People from the village began to visit, drawn by the light that seemed to radiate from her work. They stood in silence before her canvases, some moved to tears, others simply breathing more slowly. Evelyn didn't speak of what the paintings meant. She didn't need to. Presence spoke for itself now, wordless and whole. One afternoon, Jonas returned. He found her standing before a painting that seemed almost alive, a cascade of white and gold light suspended in eternal motion. "You've found a way to paint silence," he said softly. Evelyn turned, her expression serene. "Silence found a way to paint me," she replied. They both laughed quietly, the sound small but radiant. Jonas studied her face and saw no trace of the woman he'd met on that fog-drenched morning. The turmoil was gone, replaced by the simple glow of one who had stopped running. He bowed his head slightly, not in reverence, but gratitude. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Evelyn and Jonas walked to the beach together. The tide was low, the air warm and calm. They spoke little, their silence companionable. Jonas bent to pick up a smooth stone, turning it over in his hand before tossing it gently into the water. Ripples spread outward, merging seamlessly into the sea. "Everything returns," he said quietly. Evelyn nodded. "Even us." They stood side by side as twilight folded into night, the waves carrying their reflections into eternity. That night, Evelyn placed her final painting against the wall. A vast wash of gold, white, and pale blue, flowing like breath across the canvas. It didn't depict the sea, or the sky, or herself. It was everything and nothing. She stepped back, a soft smile touching her lips. The presence was no longer something she felt. It was the one seeing through her eyes. She blew out the candle and stood in the quiet glow of moonlight filtering through the window. "Home?" she whispered, not to the room, but to the infinite stillness that had never left her. Dawn arrived soundlessly, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Evelyn opened her eyes to a world that breathed in rhythm with her own pulse. Every sound, the rustle of curtains, the distant hush of waves, seemed perfectly placed. She rose, feeling no divide between body and soul, between inside and out. The sea glittered through her window, light moving across it like a living memory. She realized she no longer looked for the presence. She was the presence, walking, breathing, painting through her every motion. What had once been a world to survive was now a world to behold. She walked through the village that morning, barefoot, carrying no bag or brush. People greeted her softly, sensing the change, though none could name it. A child ran up to her with a shell cupped in tiny hands. Evelyn knelt, accepted it, and smiled. The child laughed, and in that laughter she heard herself at 7, the same sound, unchanged by time. Peace was no longer silence. It was every note of life playing in harmony. Each face she passed reflected light back at her, as if the whole town had become a mirror to the stillness she now embodied. By noon, she returned to the cliffs where everything had once broken. The sea stretched vast and shimmering beneath her, yet it no longer felt endless. It felt intimate. Jonas waited there, seated on the same bench, the wind brushing through his graying hair. He stood as she approached, a smile deep with quiet pride. "So this is where you found it," he said. She looked at the horizon, light dancing on the waves. "No," she answered gently. "This is where it found me." And with that, the last echo of separation dissolved. That evening, the village gathered to see her paintings one last time before she left them to the light. The small gallery was quiet, filled with the hum of candle flame and ocean wind. People stood in front of her final piece, a canvas so radiant it seemed to breathe. Evelyn didn't explain its meaning. She simply watched as each face softened, each breath slowed. The presence was no longer hers alone. It had multiplied, spilling through the room like gold dust on air. In their stillness, she saw her own reflection, infinite, shared, whole. Before midnight, Evelyn walked once more to the shore. The tide was rising, soft and endless. She stood at the water's edge, the moon silver on her skin. Every sound, every breath, every shimmer of light belonged. There was no boundary left to cross, no self left to mend. She whispered to the sea, "Thank you." The wind lifted her hair, carrying her voice outward until it vanished into the night. The presence that once held her now moved through her, endless and whole. And as the waves folded over her footprints, the world exhaled, finally at peace.